Can Baylor's former Big 12 newcomer of the year become the de facto Big 12 comeback player of the year? Guess we'll have to wait and see. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Nissan. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. Happy 3/28 to all my Falcons fans out there. We're talking about the Bears today. We're talking about the Bears. Okay. Baylor is, I'm ready to highlight the guy who is going to have a bounce back season. I already did it yesterday. We're going to do another guy who's going to have a bounce back season for Baylor football, one that the conference might have forgotten about, but we certainly didn't. And the great folks at Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, I don't think, have either. We'll also be looking at the transfer portal once again. I have a surprise name for you guys who Baylor should be targeting for a spot potentially in their starting lineup next year, and a very special guest going to visit the Lady Bears as they get ready to jet off up the West Coast to Portland for the Sweet 16. And it's someone you're all pretty familiar with. And she was a little bit in better spirits than she usually is working at her job at the paper company in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Anyway, starting with Baylor football and the conference, the nation might have forgotten about Richard Reese, but we at Baylor have not. And honestly, I don't blame everyone else for forgetting about him because of the dip that he had in 2023. Through his own fault, we don't know. But it was a bizarre saga last year, and one that was kind of buried just in the overall saga of how much Baylor had declined on the football field overall. And you know, it was every week it was they weren't ready to play, and where's the heart, where, you know, all these other things. And kind of like the fifth or sixth storyline on any given week was, another game where we just didn't really see Richard Reese again. Because you remember going into last season, that was going to be the strength, the running game. We're getting back to really running it down your throat. You know, Richard Reese has this tremendous freshman season. Here he comes in as a sophomore, but you've also got the thunder to his lightning. You brought Dominic Richardson in from Oklahoma State, and it's like, here we go. There's no way Baylor can't have the best rushing attack in the conference. They didn't. In fact, I think they had the worst. As a matter of fact, in terms of yards per game, it was pretty bad. It offered no real threat. And part of it was because Baylor was down all the time, which was not a great situation to be running the football in. And the team who had great success on the ground in the Big 12 was Oklahoma State, the team that Dominic Richardson left. They, you know, promote Ollie Gordon, and he becomes arguably the best running back in the entire country. But you look at it this year, you have both of those guys, plus Dawson Pendergrass, and plus the guy who I've hyped up more than anybody, the only one I've probably really hyped up, is running backs coach Keenan Hall. And he met with the assembled media this week, and they asked him about Richard Reese, you know, pretty point blank of, hey, you know, he didn't get a lot of carries last year. Do you expect Richard Reese to have more of a role this year? And this is what his running backs coach had to say about it.
Well, he's going to get carries. You see what he can do. You know what I mean? I went back and studied his tape as a freshman. I watched what he did last year when he got in. There's nothing wrong with Richard Reese. I think he's going to have an unbelievable season. I think they're going to all work well together. They know they got to show up every day, work hard every day, and they got to earn every rep they get. But as you know, he's very businesslike. He's a professional. He carries himself that way. And I think he's going to have a really outbreaking season.
Now, look, I don't expect Keenan Hall to sit there and say, no, I don't think Richard Reese is going to play a role this season. No, I don't expect him to say that. But he does realize the talent that Richard Reese has, and that we saw, the explosiveness that we saw at the very end of the season. And by that, I mean the last game, because the only thing that Reese could do to get on the field, presumably, was to return kicks. And he just returned back-to-back kickoffs for touchdowns in that game against West Virginia, electrifying the Baylor fan base. And that raised the question at probably the worst time for Dave Aranda and his staff of where the heck has this guy been? You've let him rot away on your bench. And we don't know all that goes on behind closed doors. We don't. But I do think it's telling that Richard Reese stays, Jeff Grimes goes. With this era of the transfer portal and what Richard Reese had put on tape as a freshman, you got to believe he had other options. And he's coming off this year where he barely plays, and yet he is still here. So I think there's some sort of promise there of, hey, you are the heart and soul of our offense. As it should be. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers and just the side-by-side of 2022, his freshman year, and then last year, his sophomore year, it's incredible. The carries dropped down by 132. The yards are cut into 1/3 of what it was his freshman year. The average is damn near the same. 4.9 in 22, 4.9 yards a carry, and 4.6 in 23 behind a terrible offensive line. And his longest rush of the year is 28 yards. He dips his rushing touchdowns from 14 down to 2. Like, there's got to be something there. And half his touchdowns are through kick returns in one game. And he did say, by the way, that he is looking forward to returning kicks again this year. So something to look forward to for us, the fans, looking at Richard Reese and his explosiveness and just getting him out there on the damn field, man. So that's what kind of stuck out to me was the complete dip in production, but really dip in usage is what it is, and B, that he has stayed on board in what is still supposed to be a talented running back room. Now, I wonder if this new offensive style is going to help Richard Reese. And I think it will. And I'm going to go more into the running backs room, I think, next week, because there is still so much talent there. And I think it could be even better than, much better than what Baylor showed last year, and even better than what I think some people expect. But when I see Richard Reese, I do think of a guy like a Lake Seastrunk or a Devin Chafin even. He's got some power in there. Shock Linwood type explosiveness. All these old Baylor names. And the thing that those guys had in common was they absolutely benefited from running in that spread, air raid style of offense, whatever you want to call it. But certainly one that very much focuses on spreading out the field and still using power running in between the tackles, which is what Richard Reese can do. He was a bell cow in 2022. And we kind of said by the end of the season, that's a lot of hits for a freshman to take, a true freshman. And that's true, but that doesn't mean he can't be an every down back. And he was kind of supplanted by Dominic Richardson. But I think if you think back to the Briles offense days, Shock Linwood and Lake Seastrunk were the number one backs, but it was almost tough to differentiate a lot of the time. I think back to like 2015, the last year of it was Shock, it was Devin Chafin, it was Johnny Jefferson, it was even some Terrence Williams. They were throwing 4 backs at you and 3 with pretty regular consistency. Like, it was tough to differentiate 1 versus 3, depending on the package that you were in, the yardage that you were in. These guys were interchangeable. And I think you can see a lot of that this year, which it's tough for me to, if Dominic Richardson is the quote unquote feature back last year, it's tough for me to not see him there this year. But I think it is going to be tough to differentiate between Richardson and Richard Reese, which is what we thought as Baylor fans we would have going into this year. But I'm telling you, Richard Reese is due. He is going to show us the talent that he flashed in serious form in his freshman season, and that I can only believe he wasn't allowed to flash in his sophomore season. I think we will see that again from our man, Richard Reese, coming up in 2024. All right, guys, you know what time it is. It's time for our weekly bracket highlight, March Madness bracket highlight, which is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. And each week we're picking one team that stands out, a team that has pushed it further than the rest, just like any of our all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. And I told you, I'm looking at Houston, man. Houston as the Nissan Armada. The Armada is a powerhouse. And so is Houston, but they can still do it with sleek style, as can Houston. They are hardcore #1 seed. And you saw they got tested against the Aggies, but they kept coming back. 4 players fouled out, did not matter. Their power prevailed in the end. That is why they're such a favorite picked by so many, including myself, to go and win the whole thing. And that's why they are just like the Nissan Armada. So you could take the Nissan Rogue, the Pathfinder, or the Armada and go find your next big adventure. And the way you do that is you go to a little place I like to call shopnissanusa.com. And look, y'all are betting on the tournament. You're betting on everything these days. You're using daily fantasy sports platforms all the time. How about I just take your regular daily fantasy sports platform and make it even better? It's called Better Together. As a matter of fact, it's a way for you to do your daily fantasy sports, but it's a way to play it with friends. So there's so many benefits to this. If you're like me and you're still getting into daily fantasy sports a little bit, you can have one of your friends double up on it with you. You can be a team and you can work through it together. Much easier way to ease yourself into the daily fantasy sports platform. It's a way to bring your group chat to real life. You guys brag about the ones you win. You don't talk about the ones you lose. You talk about the bets that you almost made, and one of your friends says, oh, yeah, I would have done that. Well, let's put our money where our mouths are, okay? And let's go and do it together. And it also, if you think about it, increases your chances at winning. At least 2 brains working on it rather than your glorious, very smart one brain, okay? So if you are one of my friends here in Texas, of which I know most of you are, download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using the promo code Locked On for a free $5 entry into any NCAA basketball contest. Remember that code, Locked On, LOCKEDON, because winning alone, yeah, that's fun. But you know what's even better? It's better together. You see what I did there? Shifting our attention a little bit, transfer portal open men's basketball. We're going to be hitting that hard over the next couple of weeks. Just like we did at the end of the football season, we're going to be hitting the basketball transfer portal hard. And one name that I didn't think I would be attracted to, not because he's not a good player, but just because I didn't think of him as a fit, I am now attracted to this name. And that's one that you're familiar with because he is already a Big 12 young standout, and that is Brandon Garrison from Oklahoma State. Okay. Baylor's going to need to look at the wing. I thought they really had 2 wings last year. Jacoby Walter, I consider a wing, but the only other one is Jalen Bridges. And thankfully for Baylor, he never got hurt. He played a lot of minutes, and he is a terrific, terrific player. I'm a huge Jalen Bridges fan. Huge. If you couldn't tell from listening to the show. However, I do think he's going to declare for the NBA draft. I think he does have a year left at his disposal if he wants it, but he showed specifically in the second half of the season the offensive skill that will get him on an NBA roster, or, at least in the G League and being drafted by somebody, because he is appearing on draft boards now late in the second round. So I think, and he was obviously thinking about it last year too. So I think Jalen Bridges turns pro. If he does come back, that's fantastic. I think that's great for Baylor. But I'm just not counting on it right now. So looking at someone to replace him on the wing, and I look at Brandon Garrison. And for those of you who have watched him play at Oklahoma State, you're thinking, this is not adding up. These are not the same players at all. And you're absolutely right. You're right. They're not. Jalen Bridges, knockdown 3-point shooter, can guard 1 through 4, and became a better rebounder as his time went on at Baylor. Brandon Garrison is just a different kind of player. I mean, he has 2 things specifically that I really like. First, he's got the grit and tenacity that I have been talking about and that I will be talking about throughout looking at this transfer portal. He's got that grit. He's got that tenacity. The second thing is he's got 3 years of eligibility left. And you can't fix the team experience problem in one transfer portal for 1 year, right? You can't make these guys play together for 3 years in one offseason. But you have someone out there who is really talented and has this eligibility left. He was a McDonald's All-American last year. And I talked about having a Mark Vital and that those guys don't grow on trees. This is about as close as you get in terms of someone who's in your backyard, has the experience left, not just, playing a year in the Big 12, but has experience left for you. Okay. He's got a lot of those Mark Vital qualities. He's a slasher. He's a cutter. He's a good rebounder, not necessarily a great rebounder, but pretty good, and can finish around the rim. A big kid too, 6'11", 245 as a freshman. And one thing that I think got better for him, and my Oklahoma State friends said absolutely towards the end of the season got better, was he's a good passer. He's got a good assist rate for a big man. You'll remember it took a while, but Mark Vital got there. By that 2020 and 2021 teams, when he had some great shooters, Vital was a good passer. Like, truly, he was. So you look at Garrison's numbers, and you're like, okay, 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. The game log's not great. His production tailed off towards the end of that season. And that's true. Let me remind you again, though, a freshman on a bad team, on the worst team in the league. So that's another thing, is he's young in this. He's thrown into a position where he needs to be one of the guys. I mean, he started every game basically and was playing high volume minutes for them. And still he finishes in the top 20 in the conference in offensive and defensive rebounding percentage. I already like that. That's something that can grow throughout. It did with Vital. His passing got better. His rebounding got better. His overall defense got better. Garrison is also 6th in the conference in personal fouls. So you could say, oh, lateral movement. Yeah, maybe, but also probably just being a freshman. That'll do that. But also, learning the Big 12, learning the physicality. It shows that he has a commitment to defense. He's just still trying to figure it out. So I love the idea of getting Brandon Garrison to transfer within the conference and come play for the Baylor Bears. The other wing that I'm going to look at, oh, by the way, I should mention Zeke Mayo is someone you've probably heard, one that's way high up on my list. He's one of the top transfers out there, South Dakota State. He's not heard from Baylor yet. He has heard from Kansas, and he is a Lawrence native. Just throwing that out there. But the other wing I'm looking at is completely different from Brandon Garrison. Garrison's got that Rico Gathers, that Mark Vital, Darlinstone Dubar. How about that for a name? That's a great college basketball name. Darlinstone Dubar. Okay. Some Big 12 fans might remember him. He played his first season at Iowa State in 2021, which were terrible Iowa State teams, and he didn't get much looks on that one. But he's played the last couple of years at Hofstra, okay? 6'8" junior. So as far as I could tell, I think that would mean with that COVID overlap in there, he should have 2 years at his disposal, but I could be wrong. It might just be 1. But he has become such a more polished player at Hofstra. Averages 18 points and 7 rebounds on 54% shooting from the floor, 40% from 3. 40% from 3 each of the last 2 seasons. If that doesn't scream Jalen Bridges at you, I don't know what will. Okay. And he could do it inside out, just like Jalen Bridges did. He shoots 72% in the paint. So it's not like he's just out there in the corners, although that's where he can live. And that's where he does live in transition. He is a great transition scorer, the kick out threes. To me, that sounds like Maceo Teague. Now, I'm not saying you come in and be Maceo Teague, but these things point towards it. Maceo is a better shot creator than he ever got credit for, and a good defender too. Darlinstone Dubar is a little bit taller, obviously. He's got kind of a weird jump shot. Kind of goes off to the side, little Lonzo ball in there, and it starts pretty low. So I don't love that form, but it works. And you remember Maceo Teague had a bit of that hitch in the shot that most of us, the first time we saw it, went, what is that? And then the ball would go in the basket a lot. So it worked on a national championship level. And you might be saying, Dubar is from Hofstra, man. I don't even know Hofstra played basketball. Yeah, how often did you watch UNC Wilmington, where Maceo Teague came from? How often did you watch Presbyterian, where Adam Flagler came from, one of the best shooters we've ever had at Baylor? Okay, so it might be late in the game for him to take that big a step, but I love what Darlin Stone Dubar can bring to you in terms of that long, athletic, knockdown shooter kind of a wing. If you want to keep in that mold, the way you had Maceo Teague, of it being a guard, not necessarily a wing, but close to it, and with Jalen Bridges, your natural next step is Darlin Stone Dubar. I'm just telling you the facts here. We are getting ready for the ladies to go up to Portland. And the way that you can keep up with them without the high cost of cable is my friends at Amazon Fire TV. Okay, they've got you covered for all your destinations for sports, whether it's the highlights, the analysis, the live games, anything. We got March Madness. We have got opening day in baseball today, as a matter of fact. And the way to keep up with that is through Amazon Fire TV. They've got their smart TVs where you could do the multi-views and everything, or you could just use the Fire TV stick, which I use. It's my favorite thing. I could just bring it anywhere, plug it into an existing TV, and I have got all my millions of TV shows and movies that they have got at their disposal at Amazon Fire TV. They've also recently created Fire TV channels that have a constant supply of your favorite sports brands and teams, all for free. That includes all of us, me and my many friends here at the Locked On Podcast Network, okay? Lets you dive into all of those games analyses, the highlights, and more. Anything that you would watch on TV, you can watch on Amazon Fire TV. So if you haven't checked out those Fire TV channels, you need to, okay? Trust me on this. To learn more, go to www.amazonfiretv. They're going to sue me for that. It's amazon.com/ there we go. Amazon.com/ Locked On Fire TV. We are all excited about the Baylor women's basketball team headed up to Portland and facing number 1 USC in the Sweet 16. We all watched on Sunday night the nail biter and screaming and yelling when it comes down to the final buzzer, and Baylor has shocked Virginia Tech. You know who also was doing that? Angela Kinsey. You might know her as Angela Martin on The Office. She's also one of Baylor's most famous alums. And she wanted to come in and congratulate the women's basketball team and coach Nicki Collen yesterday. And boy, I would have been so starstruck. I can't even believe that she's in Waco at the time that I am recording this. Here is Angela's visit to the Baylor women's basketball locker room.
Crushing it, and I'm so happy for you. And anyway, I'm rooting for you always from Los Angeles. So, yay! Yes. Such a good game. I was about to lose my mind.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, come on, how awesome is that? Everyone knows who she is. Everyone watches The Office. It's gotten this incredible second life in the decade since it went off the air. I have been an Office fan for 15 years at this point. It was so awesome to see her in there and actually being cheery, unlike her character. But she is like a legit proud Baylor alum. Like she's not one of those who just like kind of puts on a fancy Baylor shirt and shows up at whenever they play in LA. Like, no, she actually watches the games. She's said this in multiple interviews, and she told the team, hey, I was watching Pins and Needles on Sunday night. So she's legit. She's out there. She's following. How cool is that she comes back and actually talks to the team? It's kudos to Nicki Collen for letting her in there. And I think that kind of says a bigger picture of, Nicki Collen hadn't been to the Sweet 16. Only one player on this Baylor team has been to the Sweet 16 with Baylor. Jana Van Beek also has a national championship, but it's with Stanford. Anyway, these girls aren't. It's not like the Baylor of old where that was just an expectation and you got there every year and it was old hat. It isn't for them. This is a first-time experience for them. And, they get the comforts of having us, rally around them with the men's team out of the tournament and the great attention they got for that. And now they've got celebrities coming into the locker room. And some might say that's a distraction. And maybe it is. But honestly, I just think it's really cool for the girls to realize that this is a big moment, but that it deserves to be celebrated, even though there's still work to do. And that there are so many people in their corner and famous people in their corner watching their games, and just to show again that it is okay to celebrate getting this far while also working towards getting even farther. So credit to you, Angela Kinsey. That was awesome. Thank you for coming back. And shout out to Nicki Collen and the women's basketball team for letting her in there, letting her go by practice. She took pictures with a bunch of the players. I got to think that's a really cool experience. And of course, she and the rest of us will be rooting on the Baylor team as they head up to Portland. We'll have a full breakdown of that game against USC on tomorrow's show. I cannot wait. That game is Saturday afternoon, if I'm not mistaken, 4:30 in the afternoon. Does that sound right? It's on Saturday. Anyway, we'll have more of that tomorrow. Let me know what you think about Angela in the office and Angela stopping by our office down in the comments below, or some of those wing guys. If Oklahoma State fans are watching, is Brandon Garrison, is that a pipe dream? Is he going on to bigger and better? I don't know. It doesn't get much bigger and better than Baylor. Well, unless you go to the Sweet 16 or beyond, then maybe. And let me know what you think about Richard Reese. I know that was a big thing for a lot of fans last year, wondering where he was. How do you think he's going to bounce back this year and be a contributor to the team? I think he's going to have a big year. And maybe that's mostly wishful thinking. Anyway, drop that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We will talk about those Trojans tomorrow on your favorite show, which is, of course, Locked On Baylor.